This time on Poll Hub, the mass shooting in Buffalo has raised the sadly now traditional discussion about guns in America. But it has also raised something else, the racist Great Replacement theory and how it has become mainstreamed in parts of the GOP. Then our brand new poll with NPR and the PBS NewsHour has new data on what Americans think about the prospect of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, including what they think about the court itself and how all this might impact the midterm elections in November. Finally, it's almost time for summer vacations. Where do you want to go? Well, I've got a piece of advice. Wherever it is, make sure to download Poll Hub before you leave. Let's get to it. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm J.D. Dapper.
I'm Barbara Carvalho.
And I'm Lee Maringoff.
Something that did not happen a lot during the pandemic was the mass shootings that have become fairly common in America. But this past weekend reminded us that they were probably never too far away. We've talked a lot about Buffalo, the shooting in Buffalo at a supermarket in which 10 people were killed. Before we get into that segment, we're going to talk about that. There were two other mass shootings that weekend. There was one in Houston. There was one in Orange County, California. So we do want to make note of that although we're going to talk about Buffalo, there were other mass shootings over the weekend. And sadly, there will probably be more to come. Normally, the talk after mass shootings is about guns, assault weapons, all of that. This time, a little bit different. There has been that talk, but the shooter in this case, the alleged shooter in this case, is a teenager, an 18-year-old, who left a racist manifesto that quoted liberally from something called the Great Replacement theory. And that has become something that has been talked about in the media now over the last week extensively. It is maybe a coincidence, I guess it probably is a coincidence, that this Great Replacement theory is something that was talked about in an article about Tucker Carlson in the Times last weekend about how he has been a big promoter on his show of this theory. I'm going to shut up in a second. We're going to talk. But what is the Great Replacement theory? Let me just set the table with that. It is a variation of themes that have been around for a long time, for a century, depending on what writer you're looking at. But essentially it is this. Some government leaders and elites want to replace white people with other people, immigrants, people of color, whatever it is, and that these people will dilute the white race and will be the voters of the future. In the case of America, in this one case here where people are talking about this Great Replacement theory, the theory is that immigrants and people of color will be Democratic voters, and they will replace white voters who are declining as a percentage of the population. All right, so let me stop there and let you guys jump in. This has been a huge topic of conversation after the shooting in the last week.
Yeah, I would just say, first of all, that this is a rough topic because, in its full glory, you start getting back to fascist times in the 1930s and other kinds of horrors that have, visited us in recent years, recent decades, I should say. One of the things that I thought was interesting, just right out of the box on this, that the discussion was so bad that people who have been proponents of this in the media started denying that they've been proponents of this. And even Tucker Carlson tried to kind of bob his way out of it by not knowing exactly what it meant. Someone went back and counted that there have been 400 references on his program to it. So that probably is not accidental, but it is such a horrible view that folks sort of headed for cover on this. The ones who've been doing it. Having said that, the polling on this, AP and NORC did a poll, and there is sentiment in the country, and almost half of Republicans agree that there is an effort to replace white voters along the lines that you were talking about, Jay, and sort of like this liberal conspiracy to alter the landscape, which has been naturally being changed over time. I mean, I look back to when Bill Clinton was elected and 13% of the electorate were people of color, and now it's around 30%. And that's not because of any conspiracy. It's just sort of the way things have evolved, as they did way back when we were founded.
Well, I think 2 points come to mind, and certainly anytime you have a horrific event like you had in Buffalo, where it's in a neighborhood, it is specifically racist, and there do seem to be a lot of connections, whether causative or correlation, as we always talk statistics. Nonetheless, there's a context and a that is set for these types of events. Two things. One, I think it's really important to note that this is not new. This isn't something that has been, come out of, the 21st century discussion or research or any kind of, serious study of our country. And it is also something that has raised its ugly head many times before in the history of the United States. I think it's important to point out that it is, to a certain extent, a reaction to what is in fact happening in this country, which is that there are more people of color. There is certainly greater tolerance than there has been probably at any time in this country. It's certainly not enough, but it is different than other points in time in the United States. And so this is no question a reaction to things that are changing, and change is difficult, and change does cause reactions. Obviously, this is a hideous one. I think that one of the things that is a little bit different in this instance is two things are coming together at this time. And Lee, you mentioned immigration. We have always had an anti-immigration, also thread in this country. If you look back to the polling that was done in the 1930s, there were questions that were asked in 1939 by the Roper Organization about German and Austrian refugees. We've mentioned this on the podcast, and whether Americans thought we should encourage them, to come into this country, allow them to come, but based on our current quotas, or keep them out. 67% of Americans said that they wanted to keep them out, and another almost 1 in 5, 18%, didn't want our quotas to change for those people to come into this country. Similar polls in 1938 as well. So there's often been an anti-immigration feeling in this country. What I think is different is that is now combined along with the racist element as well. So now the immigrants are now people of color, and these two issues and these two really racist opinions have come together to mean something very different, I think, in the 21st century.
And I do think, well, there's a lot of talk right now that there is some portion of the GOP that has mainstreamed this. And we talk about Tucker Carlson, Elise Stefanik, who is a representative in New York State, who is number 3 in the House, and who ran ads and has been excoriated by the Albany Times-Union, her local paper, for basically running an ads that advocated or that talked about this great replacement theory. In that AP NORC poll, 22% or 23% of Democrats thought there was at least some substance to the idea that native-born Americans are being replaced with immigrants for political reasons. So it's not entirely a GOP thing by any means, just as this has been political in the past. It was Southern Democrats, for instance, some Southern Democrats were validly racist from the Senate floor in ways that might be shocking to some today. I think one of the things this suggests is that we haven't come maybe as far as we think we have.
Yeah, I'll just end this discussion, which unfortunately we're going to be revisiting, to point out that in Charlottesville, which got a lot of attention, the marchers there were talking about, the Jews are not going to replace us. because there's an anti-Semitic aspect to the racist that's
The
going
synagogue
on.
shooting in Pittsburgh, same thing.
Yeah,
It was,
and that and then churches are not off limits. We had that horrible one in the South with the minister and his congregants were killed at the time. I find it odd in all this that at the same time we are those proponents are saying that this is a conspiracy to take over. They're also arguing in the GOP is that Hispanics are voting more Republican, which is true. The Republicans are making inroads into the black vote. So I mean, it's sort of like having both sides of the argument. It's either a conspiracy against you or it's not. And in this case, I cannot help but think of that Statue of Liberty in the something about give us your tired, your poor. Seems to be taking a backseat to what's going on in America today, but that's on my editorial soapbox a little bit.
Well, it certainly are sobering times, but I think one of the issues here too is that these are very heated discussions, and I think they're also being used to mobilize voters to one side or the other. And as we march into a midterm election year, obviously it's still summer, but we are in primary season. I think there's a lot of attention to the midterms, which you have also covered in the new poll that we have out just released with our national partners, NPR, National Public Radio, and the PBS NewsHour. Following the leak of the draft opinion written by Justice Alito, and the news that the majority of the court actually may be considering overturning Roe v. Wade, there was quite a debate about the role of the court. So with our partners, we took a look at what Americans think of the Supreme Court of the United States. And right now, 56%, a majority, say they have little or no confidence in SCOTUS. And this is pretty significant because the Supreme Court has almost been kind of almost untouchable. It's one of those institutions that has pretty much stayed the course in public opinion over time. As we've seen a decline in other institutions, the Supreme Court, except for a few times in its history, have had the strong support of Americans. In fact, 6 in 10 Americans had a great deal of confidence in the court just 4 years ago in 2018. But there's more to this than just the court, because we also talked about the implications of this decision might have at the ballot box in the midterms. There's a lot to unpack here in this poll. So what did you guys see as most surprising or as most interesting?
Yeah, the one takeaway or a couple takeaways I had was along the lines that you're talking about. In terms of the impact on the midterm elections, first of all, most of the country has been and continues to be against an overturn of Roe v. Wade. So the court, if it does move in that direction, which it seems that it's going to, that is not something that's going to ring true with public opinion as far as the population is concerned, including approximately a third of Republicans, slightly more than a third of Republicans who also oppose that. One of the questions that we've asked in other contexts is whether you're more or less likely to vote as a result, in this case, of what is going on right now with the leak in the Supreme Court. And the overwhelming, it was by 12 to 1, people said they were more likely to vote as a result, and as opposed to less likely, and there was a significant impact gap in favor of the Democrats on that question, suggesting that for the Democrats who've been thought of to be on the sidelines right now for the midterm elections, this seems to be what could be potentially a mobilizing issue, at least as of right now. And then the question is it an issue that goes away, or is there going to be other things and state issues that as a result triggered because of what they're doing that then continue? So I think the big takeaway here was that it looks like it's going to matter. And although lots of issues come and go between the last 6 months and now, and who knows what people are going to be thinking necessarily in October, this looks like it might be something that will change the political landscape in a significant way.
Yeah, just to jump in for a sec, the question that you were talking about, we asked about whether people had heard about the leak, and we did not characterize it. We just asked about the content of the leak from the Supreme Court, and asked people whether it made them more or less likely to vote in November, and it was 49% said it made them more likely to, and only 4% said that it didn't. Jay, your thoughts?
Yeah, so the most surprising thing there was what was the percentage that said they hadn't heard about the leak?
Yeah, 25%.
Where do these people, I don't know. I mean, that's an aside that is not really an interesting point, but it was always fascinating to me.
I saw that too. Like, okay.
I get it. People have lives, and, I was in the news for a long time, and I was often surprised by people who hadn't heard about something huge. I am reminded that I just saw something recently, I think in Axios, where they're looking at social media mentions, and the Johnny Depp trial.
I was just going to mention it.
Right.
It took me I don't know how long to actually know what people were talking about when they were talking about, Depp and Heard.
There's so many more mentions of that than of Supreme Court and abortion than Buffalo. Than anything. And it is a reminder that what we talk about and what we poll a lot is not necessarily what a lot of Americans spend their time, thinking about. And that's fair. Look, you don't have to sit in front of the TV and watch cable news or spend all day surfing Twitter, scrolling through Twitter. You're probably healthier for it. A couple of things that stood out. One is we've polled on abortion a lot. In a very detailed and granular way that I think is somewhat unique among organizations, and I think we should be proud of that, in that we have shown over decades that there are a lot of shades of gray as to the opinions about abortion. And I'm gonna turn this back to you, Barb, because you know this so well, and I'm curious what you think about this. But before I do that, one of the questions that we did ask, which is something that has come up a lot in the last couple of weeks as people have talked about the prospect of states having different laws about abortion, is the idea that abortion pills that pharmaceutical drugs that lead to abortion can be prescribed over a telemedicine visit from a doctor out of state and sent into a state in which abortion might be illegal. This right now might be legal, might be possible. And we asked Americans about that. And it was not a majority, although there's almost every question, a majority of Americans had a pro-abortion rights opinion about various restrictions. In this one case, that was not the case. And so that stood out to me. The question I have for you, Barb, is that when we ask about these various types of restrictions, when we ask about the 6 different ways to look at, how you feel about abortion, a complete ban, not a ban, at first trimester, second trimester, life of the mother, all of those kinds of things. It hasn't changed very much. Do you see seeds of this decision changing that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Jay, because as you mentioned, we ask a question that isn't just a binary question. Are you on one side? Are you on the other side? Sometimes some polling organizations structure a question so you're on one side, you're on the other side, or you can be in the middle. We get much more granular than that. And what we have found is, I think, 2 things that are very important, which we have mentioned before. One, that there is an incredible consensus. Nearly 90% of Americans want abortion to be legal in the United States. There is also a strong consensus, probably 2/3 to 3/4 of Americans want some kind of restrictions on abortion. One of the things that was a bit different in this poll that we have seen change over the last couple of years is that in 4 years ago in 2018, 18% of Americans believe that abortion should be legal in this country under any circumstance. And that was the extreme abortion rights position.
I think that was 2019.
2019.
Yeah,
Thank you.
20.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, 2019. And then at this point, that has actually risen to 24%. What was interesting on the other extreme of this scale that we use, which is abortion should not be permitted under any circumstance. 9% of Americans felt that way 3 years ago in 2019. 9% also feel that way now. Obviously, not the same people, but I think it's very interesting that we have seen a shift just along the entire scale, moving along the line towards people thinking about abortion being more available. To the caveat in that is that when back in the President Obama's term, when there was the potential that there may be more Supreme Court justices that might make abortion more available than it had been. We saw the same thing, the same kind of movement, but towards the opposing abortion rights. So as debate moves from extreme to extreme, we see that people really do want this consensus position, which is legal, but with restrictions. And I think the most important exceptions that there is the strongest consensus for is the health of the mother, issues of rape and incest.
Lee, I'll just add, I know we're out of time, but that does seem to suggest that your point about this being a political issue that may be more salient this year in the midterms, that movement in that side of the aisle, that side of the position on abortion, does suggest to me that maybe it is a more salient issue than it has been in the past politically.
We'll of course, be watching that very closely as we go on. Tough to segue from our earlier two topics into our fun fact, but it is indeed a fun fact because the poll comes from our neighbors in the Q poll in Quinnipiac, who in 2015 asked where people would like to summer vacation. What state other than their own would they find a nice place to vacation? And I know you have a very interesting insight on this, Jay. So I'll just quickly go through the numbers, and then you can point out something that I thought was very entertaining in this. But the number one was for two states tied with each other. 14% mentioned Hawaii and 14% mentioned Florida, and 10% went with California, and then Alaska and Colorado at 5%, and a whole bunch of states at 2% or so for summer vacationing. And I guess people will be making plans this year, although it's the question of safety still exists with the pandemic. But Jay, what was the wrinkle you found particularly entertaining in this?
So this is an open end, and an open end question is one in which we don't list choices. We say, what state? Name a state. And so there was the opportunity for these people in this poll to name any state. And what's interesting to me is the states that got no votes. 10 states got no votes at all. They're unloved, like Connecticut and Delaware and Iowa, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Maryland, Mississippi, Oklahoma, South Dakota, and West Virginia. And I thought that's kind of sad. I mean, all of those states have something to go to.
Yeah, I was counting while you were listing those states, and just to be accurate, it was 11, not 10, not to get picky. But if you're planning to set up a B&B or some kind of hotel chain or put out a car rental agency, I'm suggesting that those 11 states are probably not the place to start that business if it's going to be summer.
Probably not. Barb, what state other than New York would you like to vacation in this summer?
Well, let's see. I actually do go to New Jersey every summer, and it's the shore, it's the ocean, it's close by, not a lot of hassle, and beautiful beaches.
I mean, 2% said New Jersey, so there you go. Lee?
Yeah. I have an odd place. I've been waiting for many decades to revisit the British Columbia in Canada, which I was put to
Not
be
a
totally
state,
outside
yeah.
of
Well,
this
which
question.
state? You do have to
Not a
go through a
state.
few states.
Yeah, so I would then probably probably put Montana on the way to Banff, on the way to Lake Louise, on the way
Montana, 3%. There you go. And New Jersey was 1%. I got that right. Mary, where would you go? Which state do you want to go to for summer?
Hawaii, that would be my top. I fall within the top states here. I've always wanted to go to Alaska. Hopefully someday we will be able to do that. And Arizona. Those are my three.
Wow, Alaska. You know what? You know that, especially this time of year, because in Alaska, the amount of daylight that you have is absolutely amazing. Good choice. Good choice.
Casey, where do you want to go?
Hawaii is always on my list.
I have been to all 50 states.
Really?
Yeah, I have. And so it's a little weird to try and pick. Well, no, as a reporter, you travel. I mean, so yeah, I've been to all 50. I love Hawaii. The place I have not gone, I've been to, but I haven't gone to where I'd like to go is in Utah. I've never been to southern Utah, into the canyon lands and all that area. I've been to Salt Lake, a bunch of times. That's a place I've never been that I would like to go. There are other places, but there's my pick.
Well, you have a significant birthday coming up, and maybe it's time to go to southern Utah.
Yeah, let's not remind me of that.
Anyway, catch up with everybody next week.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week.
Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer.
Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, please consider leaving a review. Positive reviews help other listeners like you find us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal.
If you have questions for us, tweet them at us at Marist Poll.
Finally, however, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button.
Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.